All right, here we are. Common Sense, Ohio, April 26, 2024. I feel like I've been gone for 2 weeks because I have been gone for 2 weeks, but the show went on. We had, you guys anchored the table here, brought in a guest even, and knocked it out of the park from our Facebook comments and otherwise. So excellent, excellent guest. I encourage everybody to check it out. And you can do that, by the way, at commonsenseohioshow.com, where we have a catalog, back catalog, or whatever you would say, of all our old episodes. And you know, for those who still haven't figured out the subscription options for podcasts, whether you have an iPhone or whether you have a Droid or whether you have something in between, if there is such a thing, you can just subscribe right there on the website. We've got buttons that say subscribe, like. You can check us out on social media. We have Facebook, where Norm is prolific. We have all sorts of stuff going on. So brought to you week in and week out by Harper Plus Accounting. I talked to Glenn Harper over at Harper Plus just yesterday. He was in the studio. And by the way, he's got his own podcast. So if you're really curious about what goes on there, check that out. Brett, what's a
Empowering Entrepreneurs.
Empowering Entrepreneurs. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, you check him out. If you're already an entrepreneur and you want to be empowered, check that out too. And if you just want to get to know Glenn and Julie, his they run a really tight ship over there. So Harper Plus Accounting, thank you. Now, every week I have been doing my Civil War fact of the day. Hold on, my laptop just clicked.
World War II. But you
Did I say Civil War?
Yeah, but that's fine.
Well,
do Civil War, man.
You've
Where
laced
did
some
that come
Civil
from?
War. I don't know, but you've laced Civil War in before. We've come back that far.
I've
That's
done
okay.
a little bit, but
sure.
you know, it's what I've found sort of fascinating is when you sort of look back in history at Civil War times. There's a lot of stuff that sort of happened as a result. I said Civil War again. As a result of any war, as a result of the war. So,
that's right.
you know, in history, you study wars and you can learn the facts, you can learn the details, you can learn where the soldiers went on a certain battle. But what really is fascinating is the stuff that underlies it or undergirds it. You know, the political stuff going on,
The value systems.
the value systems going on, what caused the war in the first place. You know, sometimes you get down to what it felt like to be a soldier on the ground. That's a fascinating study for anybody who wants to do it. Today's fact, though, on April 26, 2024, there is a enormous company in the United States called Montgomery Ward. Mm-hmm. All right. And Montgomery Ward was sort of like Sears and Roebuck's, and you know, it was a mail order supply house. And on this day, Roosevelt sent the National Guard to take over the Montgomery Ward plant.
Wow.
Right? In 1944.
Wow.
And you would say, why, pray tell, would he do such a crazy thing? Well, this was right on the heels of the Great Depression and the New Deal. And the CEO of Montgomery Ward was a guy named, hold on a second, I had it, Avery Sewell, or Sewell Avery, one or the other. And he was a anti-New Dealer. In fact, he would criticize people, say, oh, that guy's a New Dealer. This guy was a capitalist extraordinaire, hated government intervention into society. And I think a lot of people don't understand how significant it was when Roosevelt decided that he was going to create this New Deal, because really what it was is a socialist engineered economy, not unlike what the Nazis were doing, or not completely unlike what the Nazis were doing,
right?
Which is sort of taking over business and cramming down regulation. The U.S. Supreme Court didn't like it at all, basically struck down all of his regulations until about halfway through the New Deal, the New Deal efforts, when Roosevelt threatened to add Supreme Court justices. This is the old pack the court.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, the Supreme Court had a revelation.
Yeah.
And said, no, I guess the government does have the power to cram down all this New Deal nonsense. And hence the term, a stitch in time saved 9. So the U.S. Supreme Court reversed its field, permitted regulatory schemes being crammed down by Roosevelt and company, and they preserved the court with only 9 members. And if you recall, some of this was getting kicked around at the time, the election, where the Dems were saying we need to pack the court some more.
Oh, yeah.
And they were saying, no, we're not packing the court. The Republicans packed the court with their appointments, which was, again, this Orwellian nonsense. And if you go way, way back to I think I even did, Brett, an old lawyer talk episode on the history of the court and how many justices and sort of what that's all about. But anyway, Montgomery Ward. So what was going on is Montgomery Ward did not like labor unions. They eventually acquiesced, and they permitted labor unions, and there were negotiations that were going afoul, and they wouldn't get resolved. So they were striking, et cetera, and they couldn't get it resolved. So, you know, Roosevelt saying, look, we need this. The Army was buying all sorts of stuff, tractors and supplies, et cetera, through Montgomery Ward. So they went in and just took it over. They went in and said, we're taking over. And they actually, frog marched out Sewell or Avery Sewell, and took over the industry. Eventually, this went to just a district court, I think, and was upheld, and it sort of died down historically without a whole lot of fanfare. But it was significant because it was a huge flex of the government muscle to take over a private industry. So imagine that in today's day and age, the National Guard coming out and taking over because of this emergency that had to do with the war.
And now we have widened what an emergency is to things like COVID.
Real, and I'm going to bring this right back home in a second. But before I do, in 1954, Truman tried the same thing with Youngstown sheet and tube. So anybody who knows the Youngstown steel story, there was a labor dispute. They weren't producing the steel. This is during the Korean War. Truman goes in and tries to do the same thing, but the Supreme Court finally puts its foot down and prevents it, and sort of delineated that, hey, look, the president doesn't have this kind of authority. And the Supreme Court in that case, in Youngstown sheet and tube, basically came up with I think it was, I'm just going to confirm, I think it was Jackson's opinion sort of created this sort of 3 levels of presidential power, and whether, the first had to do with there's express authority in the Constitution or express or implied authority from Congress. Then he referred to this zone of twilight where maybe the Congress, they both have similar power to act, but Congress isn't, so they're going to do it. And then cases in which the president was defying congressional orders. So anyway, it created this framework that it sort of undergirds a lot of the administrative executive power in today's day and age. Now, what's interesting to me is I saw a headline this week. I didn't dig in deep to it, but Biden is sort of tinkering around with declaring a formal emergency over what?
Climate change.
Climate change. Right. So
which can mean anything.
Which can mean anything.
But
so,
I mean, right. Like
what kind of power?
Bad tornado.
Right. So if in World War II, or if the Korean War, these are emergencies. But now we have, if he declares an emergency during climate change, what executive power is that going to vest on the government? It might be the headline I read, which is the headlines I do read, says, this is the last vestige of freedom going bye-bye if he does that and takes over. I disagree. I think what's going to happen is it's going to push this right into the realm where our Supreme Court can finally, thoroughly, and completely gut this unconstitutional usurpation of presidential power. And they're close. And I've talked before about something called the Chevron doctrine and administrative power. But, they're very close to saying enough's enough. We've got a separation of powers problem in this country.
We do.
And we're about to tamp it down.
Well, and it may rear its head in the TikTok ban. I think that might be the first mini baby step because it's, again, it's at foreign power with TikTok. But if TikTok takes it,
but that's legislation.
Well,
as
at least,
opposed to executive action.
Yeah. This is no. The TikTok thing is executive action.
No, they passed a law.
I know, but it's
and Biden signed it.
But it's executive action. The president can come in and if the company that owns the app. Okay, we'll kind of go in a rabbit hole. I didn't mean to take it away from
No, that's all right. No,
that's okay.
Because from the way it's stated, if the app is owned at minimally 20% by a foreign power, the country that is declared a foreign, we're at war with them, basically. Nemesis. The president can say divest.
Oh, so wait a minute. So you're saying the act of Congress that's banning TikTok is really an express grant of authority to the executive branch to unilaterally act. Now that's a little bit of a different issue, but
maybe, but I'm just saying
it may come up that way.
That's not the way I read that law.
I didn't read the law, so I confess my complete total ignorance.
That's okay.
I just read TikTok banned.
But that's what it is.
It's wrapped up in that 702 section of FISA.
Yeah,
exactly. It was in the same bill.
Yeah, lots of other stuff. But anyway, it could be a little chink that
there's a lot
baby
going
steps
on
going there.
But you're right in the sense that there is a broader. There's a broader. It's not even
non-checks and balances of power. That's what bothers me.
Well, that's
about
right.
It.
So, but it goes even beyond that. It goes to this notion of what is the federal power in our country, and
there you go.
Yeah. Right.
Whether
that could
it's
include
Congress
and the president,
or the judiciary, and our country was not founded with the idea that the federal government would have such broad sweeping authority. And I've said this before. I had a debate. I've debated somebody that is completely politically on the other side of my equation, and And this individual basically said, yeah, I mean, it's almost like we're going to have two different, like several different countries where people just go and live in the country where wherever the rest of the people that agree with them are. And I said, yeah, jackass, we used to have that.
That's called states.
It was called federalism.
Yeah.
And you could go live in a state.
Right.
And that's why we did it this way, because
right.
every other empire that tries to cram down a single soul morality or
I mean,
vision.
Louisiana, for example, had Napoleonic Code law.
That's right.
And so if you want to go down there and have that kind of a legal system or live next door in, whatever, Alabama, knock yourself out.
Knock yourself out.
Yeah.
And now, and we've been surfing on the crest of this, like, all right, so what do we cram down from the federal government? What do we not? And it sort of tipped over to everything at this point.
Everything is federalized.
So it wasn't good enough for the pro-abortion folks to have legalized abortion in like New York.
Right.
They wanted they
wanted up to the day
everywhere.
of birth.
And so what did they do? They federalized the issue
Right.
and invented a constitutional right that didn't exist. And that's why Roe v. Wade was finally and totally and completely reversed, because it was never intended to be that way. No. So if you want abortion where you live, go live someplace where there's abortion.
Yeah.
Now, look, I don't agree with it anyway, and we can talk about that on some other occasion, but at least now the country is sort of starting to, like, you can just see the wheels starting to spin again, and it's operating in a little bit, like just a little bit the way it was supposed to be.
Well, and almost that awakening going, you mean we can have it this way?
Yes. Right.
You can.
Well, I think on climate change, what's going to happen is they will, at least at a minimum, believe that they have the legal power to do everything they did during COVID.
At least.
At least.
So,
because the American people, because we were bought off, they spent this incredible amount of money to make it so people could lay on the sofa and order pizza.
Yep.
The point is that the American people did not rise up because of this mollifying PPP program the way they would have. If you would have told the American people they couldn't work or open their stores for 6 months or a year, and you didn't compensate them in any way, there would have been riots. There would have been so much there would have been a huge
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't know what's going on with our country right now. I have no idea. I don't know what the populace is. I think,
instead we queued up at a window to get stuff from the government to keep us, you know what I'm saying?
No, but I don't know if I don't know if it was a chicken or an egg. I don't know if we've just been lulled into this state of complete dependence and fear.
But see,
it's not the American dream. It's not the American way.
But like Montgomery Ward, okay, they frog marched out management, but the shareholders still kept getting paid. I mean, in other words, they didn't nationalize Montgomery Ward. It didn't become part of the government. It was still private sector, and they still were getting paid. The workers there were getting paid.
Yeah, the government just took over what was going on and settled the labor disputes, and that was that.
Right.
Well, that's fascism. But
As
anyway.
opposed to in COVID, like they went way past Montgomery Ward. They actually put companies out of business permanently. Yeah. And people their shareholders weren't getting paid at all because the company wasn't able to make any income.
It's
it was way past Montgomery Ward, and we took it. The American people took it.
That's the point I'm making. Like,
that's unbelievable.
The question is why, and I'm no psychologist or sociologist, but I can speculate with the best of them. Like why? What is it? Have we been lulled into this state of dependent complacency and fear over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years to the point where we just expect cushiness no matter where we are? It's
right.
Like, and so therefore when
Uncle Sam takes care of us.
And
he's our daddy
like
now.
COVID, I mean, come on. We were talking about a flu and
that's right.
A dangerous flu. It's like
that's right.
Humans have been grappling with such affairs since the beginning of time.
Right.
And it sucks. We lived through the bubonic plague. We lived through all sorts of craziness.
Right.
And now all of a sudden we're so afraid of it that we're willing to stick our hands behind our backs and let the federal government handcuff us. It's like, what? I wasn't.
Yeah.
Personally speaking, and I was appalled that others were. It's not that I criticize those people as much as I'm curious.
Wear your mask all you want. But don't make me wear one.
Right.
Don't make me shut down my business.
That's right.
don't make me fire my employees. Don't make me,
is it
become impoverished.
Is it because we have a small business and, so it's probably a bunch of things at once, as most things are, and all three of us here at the table operate small businesses. So we're all on some level entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs on some level beyond that have a certain independence and, or maybe I have a certain inability to be commanded by authority.
That's why you like to do what you do.
I like to do what I want to do. Sometimes really bad, sometimes really good, sometimes in the middle.
Really small businesses like ours.
And we got crushed.
We don't get any of the cushy stuff that the government commands big business to give to their employees. You and I don't get a paid vacation.
No.
You and I don't get free health care. We don't get free this, free that, free the other thing. None of it is built into our compensation package because we are responsible for our own compensation.
That's right. That's right.
And it's like the rest of society doesn't even understand that, like, when they get 10 weeks off for a new baby being born and the dad can just lay around with the mom for a couple of months, wonderful. I'm so happy for you. But you and I and Brett, we don't have those benefits.
I had a kid down here, and I say kid because he was probably younger than I am, but certainly an adult. And he was down here for a fundraiser for a far leftist candidate one night.
Yeah.
And he worked at Coda. This is in the middle of COVID, right? Actually towards the end of COVID.
Right.
And he worked at Coda. And, we sort of got into this a little bit and about how we should compensate and how we should do this and how we should do that. And I said, look, man, let me tell you what my income has been for the last year. And it's about goose egg. It's about zero.
Right.
And I'm doing my best to pay people. But before we got there, he's just like, well, if you can't pay yourself or if you can't pay your employees, you're just going to have to take less. And I said, you don't understand. I'm not taking anything. Like, I'm not getting paid.
Right.
Zero.
Mr. Transit Workers
Mr.
of America.
Minimum Wage, jack it up. I'm not getting paid anything.
Yeah.
So, and he's like, well, you should just take less. And I said, well, I'm already taking zero. How do you take less than zero? And it stopped him in his tracks. Yeah. He had no concept of it. And I said, what are your hours right now? I mean, what do you do at Coda? Are you working at home at your granite kitchen countertop with your government supplied laptop, staring at screens? Or are you actually, what are you doing? And, he didn't have any answer.
He's driving a bus with nobody on it.
No, he was like on the admin side. He wasn't even driving the damn bus.
Wow.
He wasn't doing anything.
Yeah.
But he's a member of the TWU, Transit Workers
But he was
Union.
getting paid the whole time.
Sure.
And, and he thinks that the evil capitalists like me, because this guy was a flat out communist.
Sure.
We got done with it. They all looked at me sort of like with a smile. Like, now what do you think? Like, they got me. And I said, yeah, I know what this is. This is called communism. You guys are a bunch of communists.
Communists on tires.
You guys are a bunch of communists. I get it. And it was Susan Sarandon and her whole ilk of people trying to raise money for this party. And, it's just a completely different ideological way to look at life.
Well, these people, they don't know what self-sufficiency is.
Zero.
They have no idea what it is like to wake up in the morning and realize that you have no income right now before your first cup of coffee that day until you get your ass in gear and make it happen. Convince somebody to do business with you. Complete some kind of marketing campaign so somebody calls you back and gives you an order or comes into your office or hires Brett or hires you to be their lawyer. I mean, they have no idea. They get paid whether they work hard or whether they don't work hard. They get paid whether there's customers on the bus or no customers on the bus.
And I always ask these kind of guys, it's like, all right, so you want the government to sort of well, then the government will take control and do this and that. And I was like, well, I would ask them, how many legal pads should I buy next month?
Right.
And they sort of look at me. I said, well, how many pens?
Right.
And they sort of look at me and like, well, what should my marketing budget be? And they just sort of look at me. I was like, the point is you have no effing clue. Right. And how on earth do you think that some guy sitting in Washington, D.C. would have any clue how to run my business? I figured it out through hard knocks over 25, almost 30 years now of doing this, how I run my business. I'm not perfect at it, but I have figured it out. And I can tell you this, if anybody here in this room walked into my business, it would fail. Not because I'm smarter, but because I have done it. I'm swimming in it. I couldn't run your business or your business. We have figured it out. And they think that somehow the government can just be responsible for all this.
Well, Coda, I got news for you. Mass transit authorities are not businesses. they don't live out of the revenue that comes into the fare box.
No, of course not.
Right.
Because it doesn't support their
It's
business.
gigantically
enough.
subsidized.
Right.
I mean, it's
not even close.
It's out of Franklin County's sales tax. It's out of federal government highway funds that are diverted from upkeep and building bridges.
So we have bumpy roads because we have COTA buses.
and shitty bridges.
And meanwhile,
And they're building bike trails and all this fruity tooty stuff instead of fixing the roads with a highway trust fund.
right. Well, anyway, that's
hey.
our rant on this nonsense. But anyway, Youngstown
Great
Sheeton 2.
rant.
Check it out. Montgomery Ward, Youngstown Sheeton 2.
Youngstown happens to be in
Chevron.
Ohio.
Yeah. So,
And
Ohio
the
must be-
phrase "stitch in time." I had no idea that came from that.
Well,
That's
a stitch in
interesting.
time saves 9 is the
Interesting.
phrase.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm going to
Interesting.
throw a First Amendment bomb to start off another subject. If
do it.
You guys good with
I
that?
like that one.
So I'm digging Ohio State University's new president, former superintendent of the U.S. Naval Academy. I love this guy. He understands the difference between the First Amendment, okay, and camping out and trespassing and, creating zones and occupying buildings and all of that. So I think 12 people arrested by CPD and campus police yesterday. Fine. But I do want to say something to my conservative friends that want to go one step further and actually use these campus speech codes, against the Hamas protesters. So I support Israel. I condemn anti-Semitic hatred. I love everybody, as you know, but I am a First Amendment absolutist. And if a Hamas supporter wants to get on the quad and hand out flyers or engage in speech that says, I hate Jews and Israel shouldn't exist as a country, he or she has every right to do that, as despicable as those messages are. And I don't think that so-called hate codes or hate speech codes or this crap that they've invented basically to shut down conservative speech. I don't like that conservatives now are coming along and saying they want Columbia or New York or these other universities to just ban speech itself. That's wrong.
Correct.
And so
It's totally wrong. Right.
That's totally wrong. And so
But it's a very nuanced problem.
it's a nuanced
Yes, it
problem.
is.
And I do understand emotionally how conservatives, having had, fire bombings and assaults and stuff sprayed on them and all of these terrible things that have happened to conservative speakers on campus, wanting now to upend the table back on to the liberals. And I would encourage them, okay, if we have a campus speech code, I can see why you would want to use that tool, on the other side. I get that.
Sure.
I understand it. But overall, I'm against these speech codes. They shouldn't be used against either side.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But so it is nuanced,
Yeah.
Steve.
It sure is.
Yeah,
Exactly. I mean, if you have parameters where you can be to speak out, okay.
Well, let's
And if you're in that zone that you can't or making too much noise,
that's right. Well, you have to break this down.
yeah.
So here's the thing: we have free speech in this country, and free speech means that the government, not private entities, but the government can't punish you or stop you from speaking freely. Now, that's a pretty broad statement, so everybody knows you can't scream fire in a crowded theater and all the exceptions. And
Well, you can, but you'll have retribution.
Well, you can have they can stop that,
yeah,
right? So
right.
one of the things that the government can do historically in our country, despite your First Amendment right of free speech, is something called time, place, and manner restrictions. And anybody who's been to law school, your first year of con law, you learn this stuff, or maybe it's your second year. But constitutional law 101 is time, place, and manner restriction. Now, what the hell does that mean? That means you can't scream fire in a crowded theater. That means if you're gonna try to shut down High Street in Columbus, Ohio, like they did during the BLM riots, you have to go get a permit, and it has to be approved. Now, the permitting and approval process has to be fairly administered. In other words, they can't give the KKK a permit but not BLM a permit, or vice versa.
Exactly.
But if any of those groups does this without a permit, you can shut it down. And another individual I was arguing with during this during these riots. She was like, well, you're against the government stopping these kind of things. I said, no. These people have shut down my life.
Right.
Like they are impinging on my freedoms now by shutting down our city and rioting and destroying property. That's not free speech.
Right.
If they want to go get a permit, then damn it, go get a permit, shut down the Capitol, march on the Capitol. They'll believe it or not, the government will close down High Street for you on a Saturday.
And they will protect you.
And they'll protect you from any naysayers.
Right.
Or for violent naysayers. Now, naysayers can go and scream.
When the KKK did their little demonstration on the State House lawn, the State Patrol protected them.
That's right.
Against people that hate the KKK.
Yep, absolutely.
And I get it.
And these people say, well, that's not good enough. We want to go break things. Well, you know what? That's a crime.
Yeah, right.
That's a crime. Now, take this to the colleges and campuses. I think it's, like Title VI?
Title VI.
You have this weird sort of, the government has intervened and said, we're going to give some legislative meat to the First Amendment and say you can't be discriminated against based on speech.
Yeah.
But then that sort of creates this sort of double-edged weirdness, So does that mean that I can't say things that are going to offend you, or you can't say things that offend me?
Yeah.
And then should a public university shut that down or not shut that down? It gets really dicey.
Right.
But I think the bigger problem here is we have an what's the right way to put it? Unequal enforcement of free speech laws on campus. And that's what your conservative friends are saying. They're saying shut this down just as if they would shut down the opposite voice.
Exactly right.
And I'm saying, and I think you're saying, and I think we would all agree here, shut down neither.
Exactly.
Correct.
But at least enforce order.
Correct.
You can't take over public campus buildings. You can't create human barricades. I mean, there's videos of professors coming out in their bullshit gowns, creating this wall to protect these people.
Right.
And they're even telling the media, you can't film us. It's a public freaking park.
Yes.
I can film whatever you want. So it's like as they're protecting, as they're professing to exercise their free speech, they're preventing others from doing the same.
Mm-hmm.
It is so ass backwards and so absurd. So I can understand your conservative friends backlash saying, shut these people down.
Oh, you hear it nationally, Clay Travis, for example, on what used to be the Rush Limbaugh show. So, he's like, hey, you've got to bring in the National Guard and just squelch all this.
I heard that National Guard comment.
Maybe if it's out of hand and the university can't control it, but the problem is ab initio. From the beginning, the university is encouraging it.
That's right.
They're supporting it. So what the bigger problem is,
like those presidents that testified before Congress,
correct,
right? And they would not, under their speech codes, they wouldn't admit that it is hate speech, against the Jews to say all these things.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you're going to have a speech code,
at least
you've got to enforce it both ways.
Both ways, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you run into something else called an equal protection problem. Yeah. But so what the universities are doing is sort of sanctioning one group or one idea, but not another. And
100%.
You can't tell me if there was a MAGA rally taking over buildings that they wouldn't come in with all the forces available at their whim and shut it down.
Yeah.
They would. But if you're saying kill all the Jews, then somehow that's okay.
That's okay. Right. It's protected.
I think both sides have the ability to be abhorrent.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So there's messages on both sides I don't like, but I respect the right to at least profess your message. And the problem is a time, place, and manner problem, as well as an equal protection problem.
Yeah.
And it's not just send in the National Guard. It's like, wait a minute, public universities can't sanction one or the other or one over the other.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they shouldn't permit these morons to take over public sectors
100%.
Of our society.
Right.
You can't do it. I don't care what their free speech rights are.
And even with the protests on campus, you got to feel for the students that are taking finals this week or last week.
God's
sake. And it's they're paying for this education that the university has said, okay, you're allowed between this line and this line. The noise has to be down, but you can be here. You can protest. But there are kids paying for an education over here trying to take a final.
Right.
And if
you want to disrupt it, okay, but you're not going to.
And if it were... I'm not even going to go so far as to say as guys wearing sheets and white hats. I'm not even going to go so far as to say if it were KKK. If it were MAGA, If it were people wearing MAGA hats, they'd shut it down.
They have shut down.
And that's what's amazing.
Young Republican club speakers.
Well, not even that.
All
like
over
you
campus.
go a little bit more offensive, but it's like to them. I mean, not to me.
them. I know.
Right.
Like just put on red MAGA hats and walk around, and I'll bet they would shut it down. But they won't shut it down when it's pro-Hamas people saying "kill all the Jews," "America sucks,"
right,
and "death to America."
Yeah, sure.
Not only that, they're like sanctioning it. So
right.
Which
is
problem?
Isn't that mind blowing?
It is mind blowing.
It's mind blowing to me. I
Professors in their graduation gowns with their ribbons. I mean, it's like, who are these jackasses?
I just cannot fathom where the Jew hatred is coming from. 75, 80 years after the Holocaust. Like,
is it Jew hatred or is it just America hatred? I mean, because it's like it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to say death to America. It's really just we hate America. We don't care what your cause is. If you hate America too, we're best friends.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, well, and
it blows me away.
Kind of diving a little bit deeper, and then I saw something that House Speaker Johnson was at Columbia University.
Which was pretty ballsy of him.
Which it was, but I also have to say you might want to stay home and do some homework though, because he did make a quote, and I don't know why I wanted to look at this, but he said during a radio appearance ahead of the rally that at Columbia, Johnson said his alma mater wouldn't tolerate anti-Semitism on its campus, and that if it happened there, he'd be down there himself. And he graduated from Louisiana State University.
Yeah.
I'd have to tell him go look at history because they had a protest in November of 23.
Oh, did they? And he was not down there himself?
He wasn't down there. So, Mike, you might want to do a little bit of homework before you make the comment.
He was a little busy back then.
These are the political... It's like these political. Well, it shows you.
That's when he took over for Kevin.
On both sides of this.
Exactly.
These people go there for political theater.
That's exactly my point. And look, it's just theater.
I'm with him. I'm with him. Look, I'm right at this table saying
the president of the United States and the vice president are not standing up for Jewish Americans.
Of course not.
So I'm glad that the Speaker of the House, who's number 3 in line, I'm glad he did.
Renounce it, condemn it. See, I don't know. What do you guys think of this stuff? So it's like these reporters go stick microphones in the face of like Ilhan Omar or Ocasio-Cortez and say, do you condemn the death to America speech? And it's like,
no, they don't.
Of course they don't. Of course they. Well, I don't talk to Fox News reporters.
It's a gotcha question.
It's sort of like, it seems sort of theatrical to me.
Yes.
Now, it is interesting to me that they won't. But, it's like sticking a microphone in on the other side. So, do you condemn global warming? Like,
they always ask Republicans these kinds of questions. I'm glad to see somebody in the media asking tough questions of the other side.
Well, I'm with you. It just seems sort of theatrical, but at the same time, they're making a point. So,
every Republican gets asked about abortion, right? Every Republican gets needled about abortion. Oh, you hate women, right? So that's why you have these feelings. Nobody asks Democrats, right? Well, are you in favor of abortion up to the day of delivery? And none of them will answer that question, right?
You get crickets.
They don't really want to go back to Roe where it was the first trimester. Now it's like so radical, they want to be able to abort up to the day. Which Ohio, our law right now is that.
Our law right now is that. All right.
Which is a nightmare.
So
anyway.
First Amendment, we've checked that box. Maybe there's more checking.
So, dudes, something we have talked about in the past, this Trump case in front of the Supreme Court, and questions and arguments went back and forth yesterday. And, it's kind of cool that now you can listen to the Supreme Court live. Mm-hmm. At least, it's not, cameras aren't on, but you can listen to it. And it's about a presidential immunity. And once again, I'm sure what Roberts is going to do is split the baby and come up with some qualified immunity thing. But I just love the moronic questions coming out of Ketanji Brown Jackson in particular, who said that if we give immunity to the president, it will become a seat of criminality, which is a 1619 point of view. And the lawyer for former President Trump answered her with, well, we've had this system for almost 250 years, and I don't think the presidency has been a seat of criminality, right? Yeah. But of course, she doesn't view it that way. A 1619 project person like she is would view that basically the entire history of the United States has been one of criminal behavior. Alito, on the other hand, was superb, and he asked the Justice Department attorney, Well, what about FDR's internment of the Japanese? I mean, clearly taking away their property and forcing them to live in, I don't know, what was it, 11 different camps all over the United States?
I didn't know 11, but yes, camps everywhere.
I mean, if that isn't kidnapping and theft, I don't know what is. So, should they be able to go and take FDR into criminal court for something he did as an official act? Or you could even construe it as he did that as an electioneering thing to benefit himself personally, which they're saying Trump did about January 6th, that was a personal act, not a presidential act, because it was about his reelection. Well, you could say that about any presidential act. You could say that about declaring war on Japan and Germany, that he was trying to ensure his reelection. I mean, the hair splitting going on at the Supreme Court, and the fact that we don't have separation of powers like we need to, it bothers me, number one, that the Supreme Court is even musing over presidential power, because the presidency is an equal branch of the government as the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is about to decide what presidential powers are. Well, can the president decide what the Supreme Court's powers are? These are three independent branches that are supposed to be equally strong. So,
I mean, look, this is
heavy duty.
There's a lot
here
of stuff to unpack with this argument, and I'm not prepared to do it here at the table, other than just to maybe point out a couple issues.
Yeah.
It's like, I just skimming some of the comments by the justices during questioning. I think at least they're starting to they understand here that there's a bigger picture at play.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I think one of them even said they're writing the rules for the ages here, because this has the ability, this being prosecuting a sitting president, has the ability to be weaponized by political opponents. And
after they leave office,
Well, before, during, and after they leave office. Well, before, because it's right now, and Trump might be president.
Right.
During, I guess at least then they have impeachment. And then after, as they're planning to run maybe again. So on the other hand, there are certain acts that I would argue you should be able to prosecute a president for committing. And we're just in this weird spot. This, bad policy, bad practices, and a screwed up, I always call it my pool table analogy. When you play pool with sloppy players, the table gets all sloppy, and it's a really difficult game. And our game right now politically is very difficult because the parties have become very sloppy against each other. And, when the Democrats here have weaponized every tool at their disposal to take down their most evil adversary that they perceive has ever existed. And as a result of that, we have arguments like this going on in the U.S. Supreme Court. Now,
there's no goodwill in our government anymore.
No.
Nobody
the gloves are off.
Yeah, nobody gives anybody else any space. So our system is not working.
And we've been close to this a little bit, but, we are making precedent, or the Supreme Court has to make a precedent that somehow fits all this together going forward. Otherwise, it's either going to be unfettered conduct by a president who shouldn't be able to commit unfettered conduct, or it's going to be a political weapon by the other party, no matter who's president. And they have to somehow write an opinion that navigates the treacherous waters of those two issues. And I don't envy the task, because they have to do it with their own political splits. Now, I did see Amy Coney Barrett had some questions along this line. Like, she was like, well, wait a minute. What if the president does actually commit a coup? Let's assume that the allegation is true. Change the facts or change the people. We actually have a coup where the president tries to take over the Senate, where the president tries to take over the government. Are you saying we can't prosecute that because it's somehow an official act? So, you may get a definitional decision, like, if there is that, then you can prosecute. But here we didn't have that, so you can't prosecute. I don't know how they're going to weasel around this.
Right.
We'll just have to see.
Right.
To me, I would think it is if I had to bet, the show will go on. They will permit the prosecution for the J6 stuff on some level. I don't think the Supreme Court is actually going to tamp it down. I can't even tell you how or why or how they're going to do that. Why they're going to do that? Because I think they don't want to appear like they're interfering at that level.
They just want to let it air out.
Well, the same Amy Coney Barrett also said that she didn't think she thought a line should be drawn between state prosecutions and federal, and she asked that question.
That's an interesting question.
Can we not? So that knocks out that crazy lady down in Atlanta that is doing the J6 trial.
She's doing the election interference trial, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And she's turned that into a RICO, which is lunacy.
But it's a state prosecution.
Yes,
for criminal.
Yeah.
And she is saying, can't we at least draw the line that state courts can't be involved in this? So that would knock out the J6 trial.
Well, and I think if you're going to do some, you have to do well. No, not when I say J6 trial, I mean the one in D.C.
Which would be what, the electioneering thing?
No,
that Bragg brought, or the Letitia James?
No.
I don't know which one.
D.C. Attack on the Capitol. Trump is indicted, and that's
the Jack
pending.
Smith one.
The Jack Smith one.
Okay.
Does it knock out Florida? Does it knock out? That's a federal case too.
And that's
though.
federal too.
Does it knock out the Georgia state law
and the New York
RICO? Does it the New York thing that's going on now? I mean, it's like.
Well, so I'm kind of playing this out though. If the states don't have any say in, taking a president to court, let's put it that way, is it taking some powers away from the state though? If you do that as well.
Well, the question is whether the Constitution prohibits it.
Okay.
It's whether the Constitution prohibits it.
Because I could see
law prohibits
I could see
it.
a president just taking out his angst against a state that voted. If you're red, they voted blue. You know what I mean?
So what's the consequences of a president who goes too far if you have a system that doesn't permit prosecution of a president that goes too far?
If the president has the powers to make that state,
I'll tell you what, nobody
I don't know.
Nobody is talking about the flip side of that coin. What kind of a president are we going to have who is fearful?
Well, that's right.
Legitimately fearful
sure.
that every Tom, Dick, and Harry prosecutor across the country can hail him justifiably or not, and in front of a grand jury, get him indicted, and he has to answer for it as a private person after he leaves office, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So Obama hitting the 16-year-old American, with a missile. Right? No trial, no court, no
that's
nothing.
Right. Well,
and dumb old Ketanji Brown Jackson actually asked, well, what if the president orders an assassination? Hey, lady who can't define what a woman is, Ketanji Brown Jackson, are you telling me you don't think in American history the president hasn't authorized an assassination?
Like Fidel Castro?
Sure.
Like Soleimani? Donald J. Trump eliminated
Saddam
Iran's
Hussein.
What is she talking about?
Right.
We've authorized torture.
Osama bin Laden.
Well, yeah.
I mean, these are assassinations, folks.
These are assassinations. I don't know what kind of.
What she's saying, though,
she's in another universe.
Unless she's meeting outside of a war situation.
Right. So
I'm selectively going to kill this guy.
We're not at war with Iran.
Well, true.
And he killed Soleimani.
Yeah.
So where do you draw the line?
True.
So where do you draw the line? There's no declaration of war, so we kill Soleimani. Is that an assassination? Well, yes. By a certain definition.
By
absolutely
definition.
is.
So can Mrs. Soleimani take Trump?
But what if the president ordered an assassination of somebody who is seeking to prosecute him?
Right. Sure.
That's different. That's the point you're making, Brett, is that's different.
Sure, that's different.
That feels different.
Yeah.
So can you prosecute him for that?
Right.
Well, and that's in question. That's true.
Look, I always look at this from a legal standpoint. How do you create a legal standard, a line, that is relatively straight and understandable through this minefield of this cesspool of possible facts?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's difficult to do. And it sort of reminds me of, like, I think it was Adams that we created the government. And what kind of government have you created? A republic, sir, if you can maintain it. It's like the implication Steve, of our government is we have to have some civility, and we don't.
So, Steve, as you know, we have laws against murder. We have laws against using a gun to rob a bank. We have all kinds of laws, and they get disobeyed all the time. What really this comes down to is the American people need to be damn careful about who they elect as president. Number one, right? Mm-hmm. They have to get to know the person during the primary season.
The dating season.
During the primaries. We need to have presidential debates. We need to elect. I mean, some of this relies on good faith. There is no law that's going to prevent the president from doing any number of despicable, illegal, criminal things, right? We give the president incredible power. The question is, if the president uses those powers in a way that benefits the country, or he thinks he does, and he's acting in good faith, and maybe he
maybe
sends SEAL Team
you've-
6 to go do something.
Maybe you've created a standard here that makes some sense. So, look, everybody says, well, how can you get in the minds of somebody else to figure out what their intent is? Well, we do it all the time. So anybody who's ever been in the criminal justice system knows that that's how it works.
Right.
If you're acting in a certain way, so if I'm acting on purpose to commit a murder, it's different than if I accidentally run into somebody and kill them. Those are two different things.
Right.
And you would say, well, how do you know it's an accident? Well, you have to look at all the facts. You have to look at the circumstances. A jury gets to figure it out. Maybe that's where they draw the line. The court's going to have an initial showing of, or require an initial showing that this is something that a president did that that the intent was self-serving and personal, and not an intent to benefit the country. That may be.
I'm with Trump's lawyers, and I'm not with Trump's lawyers because of Trump. I'm with Trump's lawyers because I don't want the social circus of former presidents, whether it's Barack Obama or Bill Clinton or whoever, being hauled into court and then therefore when they are president, knowing they can be hailed into court, they won't be a good president.
The question is whether the president's acting, and this is back to your intent point. The question is whether the president's acting.
I don't want to get to that question,
in an
Steve.
official capacity.
Yeah.
Because nobody here, and I don't even think you, Norm, would say you can't prosecute a president who killed his wife, or if it's a she, killed her husband while in office.
Right.
Right.
You should be able to do that.
Exactly.
You should be able to prosecute that person.
Right.
Impeach, prosecute, send to prison. But the question is, when you get to this blurry line, where is it an official act? Is it not an official act? And there's going to have to be a preliminary showing whether this is an official act or not. Otherwise, you can't. If they can make that showing that it's an official act, then I say immunity applies. If they can't, then immunity doesn't apply. But we're in a gray area here, and how they navigate the line through the gray area will be interesting to see.
We need immunity. Not every president's going to have $175 million to put into escrow so he can appeal a crackpot state court.
It's insanity.
It's insanity.
No, it is.
And for that kind of criminal, just being taken to court is the punishment.
I mean, look,
we need immunity up front.
This is the lawfare concept that it's not unlike the seizure of Montgomery Ward, right? The government just takes over and can do it at once. It's lawfare. You can. And then how are you going to win that if you don't have the financial backing, or at least the public backing, to donate to your cause?
The way to win
fight it
is to have immunity up front. The Supreme Court, firemen, cops, the Secret Service, the FBI, a lot of people in the government have immunity for all kinds of different things.
They do.
Our government needs to give
But they don't have immunity for criminal acts.
I understand that. And I think the one big exception, except for they could say murder. They could say, they could name a few felonies.
I think
but everything else,
it's going to have to fit into official capacity. And if you define that as what kind of felony they're committing,
not going to be able to do that.
It's going to have to fit into an official capacity standard on some level. I think that's the only way through it. Now that I'm thinking it through and talking it out,
seems pretty. At least those are
your
barriers.
It's not logical because what will happen is every single thing the president does can be viewed as both personal,
that's life,
and
man.
official.
Yeah.
Look, I swim in a gray area, murky water of a justice system.
Every
as it is.
decision a president makes,
but at least you can put words to it. Official capacity. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's going to take years to figure that out, but at least we have something to start with.
And the question is,
official capacity.
Do you want that figuring out process to happen in courts? And I don't. I do.
I absolutely do.
I want our presidents to be able to retire with dignity and move on.
An official capacity. Look, if you let Congress define that, it's still going to have to be interpreted by the courts. So Congress will say we prohibit blah 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 blah. Let's assume there's some legislation that defined official capacity.
Yeah,
and
we have
even that's going to be subject to interpretation. So eventually the courts are going to have to sort it out. That's what their job is.
We have impeachment in that's for things that happen that Congress knows about in real time. They can impeach the president. Now, the question is, since the president controls the armed forces, Could he be like Andrew Jackson and just give the middle finger to the Supreme Court and say, no, I'm marching the Cherokee out of their nation. I'm doing the Trail of Tears.
Yeah.
Well, Biden's already flipped off the
Right.
courts
I'm
with
forgiving
the loan forgiveness. He's already done that, and he's doing it again. He's ready to rip it out again.
Exactly.
Is that against the law?
Sure it is. And what
do you give him immunity for it?
Congress has flinched, and they have decided not to impeach Biden. And there's several reasons they could impeach Biden. He's not defending our borders. He took a protect and defend oath when he was sworn in, and he's not living
what
up
high
to
crime and misdemeanor has he committed?
violating the constitutional duty to protect and defend.
I don't know that that's a crime.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, is that a high crime or we went through this with Trump's like what is a high crime or misdemeanor?
As the Supreme Court has noted in the past, the crime is defined by Congress by their vote.
Well, see,
that's how they get to. Well, they impeached Trump twice.
So I say this
once
was
when he was
Trump's
out
argument.
of office.
This was Trump's argument. What high crime and misdemeanor have I committed?
Exactly.
By anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Look, we beat the horse. The Supreme Court's going to rule, and I suspect it'll rule quicker than.
You think quick?
Yeah.
Most of the talking heads will say it will be the final decision of the session, and it will be remanded back to that wacky judge. And therefore, this trial won't be able to take place.
I agree with all that, but that is a decision. They're going to say we need more facts. Go back and decide whether this was official capacity or not, and give us a definition of official capacity, and then we'll test that.
And that's a way to wiggle out of this.
Well,
because Roberts is a wiggler.
Look, it's a way to wiggle out of it, and it is also a way to practice judicial restraint. It's not the U.S. Supreme Court's job to dictate policy and practice and make law. That's what they did in Roe in the first place, and it was a disaster. Okay. So, look, there's a fine line to walk there, and I'm not necessarily agreeing. But if they send it back and say, you need to tell, we need a fact-finding hearing to know exactly this. You give us a legal decision on whether this is an official act, and then we'll review that. So our standard is, it's got to be an official act or not an official act. You tell us whether that is or not here, and then we'll go back and review it. But either way, the outcome is the same, Norm. It gets kicked down the road.
So while I have your dander up, and Norm is practicing practical witchcraft here, because I like clear messages, I like guardrails, I like clarity. And our Supreme Court, in this Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard case, is now what I said back then last year is happening with Dave Yost giving advice to state universities and colleges where he said, because of that decision on admissions, I am telling you that the state of Ohio will not defend your ass in court. I, as Attorney General, Dave Yost, will not defend you in court if you have race-based scholarships. And so now that is a big issue in Ohio. The School of Journalism in Athens, Ohio U School of Journalism,
one of the biggest ones in the country, right?
Yes.
They
did not award 12 race-based scholarships totaling $46,000. So small beer, but I'm sure to a student that's significant money. Mm-hmm. They did not award the race-based scholarships because of the Dave Yost letter, and the dean of that school is flipping out. She is saying it is absolutely racist on the part of Yost and other people to say that scholarships intended for black students are discriminatory against white students. She said to think that way is itself racist. So the Supreme Court had in its hands the ability with this admissions case. What I'm saying, Steve, why didn't they just say race-based anything is wrong? Like, what the hell is...
hold on. It wasn't an issue in the case. Whether scholarships aren't admissions standards.
I'm saying it wasn't. But the concept of racial discrimination, Title VI, once again, rears its ugly head, and the Constitution itself of equal protection, right?
Look, this is common law 101. You can't decide cases that aren't in front of the court. Courts are there to decide cases and controversies.
Okay. I get you. But we just talked about presidential immunity, and yesterday the questioning by the Supreme Court was about all kinds of hypotheticals.
Well, it doesn't mean they're
It
going to.
wasn't about the issue
They
at
are
bar.
so, but we just talked about this. So what do I think the Supreme Court's going to do? I think they're going to remand it for more information and get us facts that we can rely upon to decide the case. And when the court has not done that, it has created disaster. Roe v. Wade was a freaking disaster. It basically legislated from the bench.
I got you, man. But,
So here-
but we have chaos in Ohio now. Where
What's the court's job to solve the chaos? So it'll go up the ladder, and the Supreme Court will decide it based on the facts in front of it. It can't make up the facts and then decide the law based on what the facts aren't.
So, dude, so they had a decision that said you can't discriminate based on race to admit the students into the school. It would have been a micro step for them to say, nor any other kind of policy on campus,
No.
like scholarships.
Look, because I don't think scholarships are the same as admission.
Okay.
I think
All
you're
right.
going to get a decision that says if you're awarding black scholarships, you also have to award white, or you might get a decision like that. You might get it because that's how we handle male-female stuff. I mean, look, there's more nuance to that question.
Why
so
can't
what kind of scholarship is it? Can whites even apply? Is Yoast action not defending universities? That's got its own constitutional ramifications.
Well, he interpreted the Harvard case to mean that you can't
That's
use
right.
race.
So he did what lawyers do. We say, here's a precedent. We're going to push that precedent a little bit further.
Yes.
And then we're going to let the court tell us whether that's right. And if the court says that's okay, the next person's going to push it even further. Or maybe the court says, no, Yoast is, this is wrong. You can have a race-based scholarship. And then at least now we've created a boundary. That's the common law, man. It's been that way since 1215.
So the scholarships
Actually, before that.
So the scholarships awarded are university scholarships, not a private scholarship.
Well,
Is that
the
what's in question?
scholarships are funded by all kinds of private people.
Well, see, but-
one of the
You're exactly right.
But that's the issue. If I have $1 billion zillion and I want to give it to black kids,
then go ahead and do that. But
that's what I'm saying. Is that what that is?
Well,
Is it
to make it
school scholarship or is it private?
well, I'm going to answer
Okay,
your
yeah,
question.
yeah, okay.
If I can.
No, I'm fine.
So
Sorry.
Clarence Page, for example, a journalist, a black journalist, is one of the donors for that scholarship program, right? And he gets a major tax deduction, right, when he contributes those funds.
Sure.
He doesn't get a deduction if he just, Clarence Page, writes a check and says, hey, Normie Murdoch, I'm going to help you pay your tuition. Here you go.
Well, he could. I mean, there'd be one more level. They'd have to create a 501c3, and a 501c3 would dole out the
Or he
scholarship.
just gives me a check.
Well,
Right.
I mean, he
he
doesn't-
wants the deduction.
but-
so
but
he's going to create a
that's-
501c3, and it'll
Right.
filter through that. So is
Right.
if
That's
the-
why you create the foundations to
and
do
then
the
you
tax
have,
stuff.
That's right.
And
And then you
do,
have a
but,
question.
yeah.
So say that happens. Say a 501c3 gives a scholarship to a black student and a black student only, and only if they intend
we have
to
that.
attend
We have
a
that.
public university. So
Yeah, we have institutions
okay.
that
So by the university,
the Negro
admitting-
College Fund
by
is
the-
a perfect example.
Well, no. I'm saying earmark it only for a public institution. So we're going to give you $10,000 a year for 4 years if you attend the Ohio State University, only if you're a black student. Now, is the Ohio University, quote, complicit in that if they accept the money and admit the student? Or,
Well, that is exactly the case that Yoast is addressing.
Yeah.
all right, so
Exactly that.
to me, that's a dicier question. Question. I would think it would turn on something like this. If the university only accepts such private scholarships from one race over another, then that's a problem.
That's a
but if
problem,
they accept
yeah.
all private scholarships for every race, every creed, every gender, every mid-gender or whatever, cis, whatever nonsense they have, as long as they do it to everybody and they open up the floodgates for all of it, I think that's probably going to be okay. The issue is one that has to be litigated on fact-based questions because there's too many possible facts.
Yeah, because Hayden walking into his junior year at UC, now he has availed to him scholarships for male nurses only.
Yeah, there you go. So is that
To help
only males
encourage-
get this scholarship? Is that constitutional for UC
I don't know.
to take the money?
I mean, it could come in question. I don't know. I mean, I'm just bringing it up as an example. I don't know.
think there's a constitutional problem with that.
don't know.
I don't think there's a constitutional problem with having a black-only scholarship as long as it's privately funded. Now, if the university is giving aid only to black students,
That's a problem.
that's a different story.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think an obvious different story.
Yeah.
If the university is accepting scholarships from 501c3s, and as long as they're not discriminating which 501c3 they're accepting, I think the U.S. Supreme Court's going to say that's probably okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Because look, that's the whole notion here is we want the private sector to act. We don't want the government to act.
so I would answer Brett and you with a little Ketanji Brown Jackson logic. Okay, I can't define.
Is
a
there
woman.
such a thing?
I can't define a woman or a man. I can't define black or white. What are we going to do? Have race courts? How do we decide who is black? Is Obama black or white? He's 50% of each, according to him.
I agree.
So which one is he?
I agree.
It's all bullshit.
Let the
fricking,
government doesn't
I
need to
almost
decide
said
that.
the F-bomb. The freaking Supreme Court could have said what Martin Luther King said. Could have said, we're colorblind. No race,
What's
anything.
the issue, Norm, though, is
Anything.
what's the government action?
The government action is selecting who the scholarship awardees are, right, based on race.
Who selects that?
The university.
I thought we were talking. You said in this case it was a 501c3
That
doling
gives
out.
the money. The university then selects the applicants for the scholarships.
So
Okay.
the issue
It's funded
is
by private.
it's funded by private.
Okay.
So I think the court may have a problem with that.
Okay.
I think what's going to happen
where
is
you're
the
going with it.
501c3 is going to have to select which
They
student
have
gets
to
it.
do the job. Yes.
Right.
Is that different
Correct.
for you?
Oh, it totally
Okay,
is.
all right.
So if you have a firemen's union,
Totally agree.
let's say it's a firemen's union, and they want to give scholarships to only sons and daughters of firemen, right?
Now, say the
That's up to
university.
them.
Say the so you would cut. I got to talk this through out loud.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
If you have a university that's taking private money to fund a scholarship,
Yeah.
and the terms of the taking the money says it has to be a black student, and then the university creates selection criteria, identifies the student, a bunch of students apply and they pick,
That's right.
and it's a black student.
And OU backed out of that.
Okay. Now the next question. So there's a couple different ways that turns. That could be deemed okay as long as they do not limit their participation in that process to only blacks, because they may also say white nurses. They may also say white male nurses. There might, as long as they open that process up to everybody and it's applied equally, that would be my defense from the university standpoint. If the university refuses to participate in a KKK scholarship for white-only students and says, no, we're not going to do that, but we will do the black one, I think now we have a problem.
Yeah, or
Correct.
take it out of politics and just say it's for Swedish students, right?
No. I want it in the most controversial terms you can possibly imagine.
Okay.
Black student and KKK white supremacy.
Okay.
No,
Because that's how you have to decide these things, because that's
Well,
where it always goes.
going-
I
It's
mean,
gonna go.
to me, those are not the opposite poles of this, but that's okay.
No, but look, it is a controversial way to say it, because if you're saying I want only blacks, then you have to be willing to have it every single way.
So nothing I've said is anti-black at all.
Of course not.
No.
Nothing I said either.
84% of OU's journalism students are, I don't know how they figured this out, but they're claiming they're white, okay? Which leaves 16% for non-whites.
Mm-hmm.
Well, African Americans happen to be 13%, so that fits pretty well. So I don't know if it's a representative student body or not.
Doesn't make any difference to me.
I'm a little outraged that they're even able, just like the U.S. Census, I'm outraged that they even keep track of race. Because
I'm with you.
we are such a melange culture now.
Well,
there
look-
are so many children that are...
Look, it's a melting pot.
Exactly.
Right.
Why are we tracking who is what race?
Those are bigger policy-driven questions.
Drives
But
me
now
nuts.
the issue is
Drives
framed
me
constitutionality. So if Ohio University says we will participate, Mr. Black Scholarship Fund 501c3 organization, we'll participate with you. And by the way, we're going to participate in similar endeavors from everybody else. We are not going to discriminate whatsoever against any private scholarship donation.
Right.
I think that's where that has to fall.
Yeah.
I think that's how it has to fall. Otherwise, you can't. The special interest groups couldn't reach out to do the job of the special interest groups. Like if I want to help
Just Italian kids.
Italian kids, or if I want to help out underprivileged kids who came from Columbus, Ohio.
Right.
When I had an Eric Yavich Scholarship Fund. All right. So this is a perfect example.
Yeah.
I had an Eric Yavich College Scholarship Fund. I worked with the Parker Lee Foundation, great organization. Everybody should look them up. In fact, we'll get them as a guest on the show.
Yeah.
And I had very, very specific standards that I wanted to dole out the money. It wasn't black-white. It was a student who was a 3.0 or below, who didn't have any exceptional credentials,
Okay.
but showed potential.
Okay.
Because I was that kid.
Yeah.
And, I was not the 4.0, although I could have been if I'd have ever learned how to apply. I wanted the average kid.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't care if that kid was white. I didn't care if that kid was a woman. I didn't care if that kid was black. Turns out everybody who won the scholarship was in fact black, because we worked with Directions for Youth that helped inner city kids to dole out the scholarship. But I didn't want the straight A top student. I wanted the mediocre student who had potential to go excel, because I think those are the people that have a lot of potential and get the least amount of help.
Yeah. I like that.
Right.
You had criteria that are not race-based.
But it could have been. I could have said, I only want white kids from Reynoldsburg, because Eric was a white Jewish kid from Reynoldsburg, because he was a white Jewish kid from Reynoldsburg.
Yeah.
I can do that if I want to, and I think the government shouldn't be able to tell me not.
No. But I think if you hand your money over to the government and say, now you're going to pick the white Jew that is the only race and the only religion that qualifies for this, then I do think there's a problem.
So that's where I disagree. I think there's only a problem with that if it is discriminately administered. So if the university only takes money from one group and participates in that process with one and excludes others, that's a problem. If they open up the doors to everybody, I think they're going to be permitted to do it.
Yeah.
So it's either all or nothing. Now, because as soon as they start choosing who they're going to do it, now you got equal protection problems.
Yeah, I don't think any government official should be involved in selecting anything based on race, whether it's farm subsidies, scholarships,
I didn't
admissions.
say should. I said that's how I think it's coming down.
Yeah, not
Now, look, I would prefer
I'm
that
saying
the private
should based on how I think it should.
No,
come
what
down.
I'm saying is, I'm talking legally speaking. I think that's how it comes down.
Yeah.
I would prefer a scenario where the government doesn't participate in any of it, and the private entity selects who the college kid's going to be.
Take the money, and
I would much
go.
prefer that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's how it should be.
Like the United Negro College Fund.
That's how
it's
it
a
should
private.
be.
It's a private entity. They make the selection,
And then
it's
there's
all.
no state action whatsoever.
right.
That's exactly
But if
right.
the
I have no
state-
problem
if
with
the
that.
state is
I would
gonna-
even give money to that.
If the state is going to enter the arena, then it has to enter it equally.
Yeah.
And it has to open up
right.
doors to everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
The state is already in the arena, so I think it's going to come down that as long as if they're in the arena, they have to open up the doors to everybody. So my prediction here at the round table, that's how this comes down. We'll know in about 10 years probably.
Well, Title IX.
Boy, we've been going a while too.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to make this is quick.
Do it quickly and we'll wrap
let's
it
do
up.
it. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Well, these are complicated
They
topics.
are.
They
yeah.
are.
We're
These
solving the world's problems.
Exactly.
We're
I
here.
love it. Let's flush it out. Exactly.
And as
It's
always,
great.
I learn from you two guys a lot. So
This has been
this is
great.
educational for me. Title IX, recently the Department of Education, Department of Justice at the federal level have now added gender identity as part of what is protected within Title IX. As we know, Governor DeWine vetoed and then was overrode on House Bill 68. So we know in Ohio that our legislature has told the governor, oh no, we are protecting Title IX females sports in Ohio and educational rights. DeSantis in Florida has said that this federal Title IX interpretation will not stand in his state. He is going to disobey it, and obviously Biden's administration will take him to court. So I find it interesting. I find it interesting that if this does go to court, my favorite justice today, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who testified during her confirmation hearings that she could not tell the senator from Tennessee what a woman is because she's not a biologist. If Title IX and gender identity, if that issue goes to SCOTUS, Ketanji, I'm afraid you're going to have to define what a
Title
woman is.
IX is going to have to, the legislative branch of government is going to have to define it. So you can say you could define a frog as a human, right? You can do that as long as the definition says, all right, a frog is hereby human for purposes of this code.
Yeah.
All right. So that's how the case is going to get reviewed. It's going to get reviewed on two levels. One, is it overbroad or forget that. I misspoke. The first level is, what is the statutory authority of Congress to act? In other words, do they have the regulatory ability to act grounded in a constitutional power? And they do here. It would be the Commerce Clause or whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
And then the second is, does the law pass constitutional muster? Is there anything about the law?
Well, and can the executive branch widen the interpretation beyond gender into gender identity?
I thought there was a law passed.
No.
So we're talking about administrative bullshit.
Administrative decision to add gender
right.
identity.
So they're gonna. Well, here's I take it all back.
Yeah. This is a Biden administration
executive order.
DOE and DOJ
to
interpretation.
Yeah, I got you. Okay.
That it includes not just bio women, but men who.
So then it's going to be
they're
evaluated under something called the Administrative Procedure Act. Has that been followed? What's the rulemaking power to do this? That's the sort of procedural grounding for this. And then they're going to have to decide, is there authority? And here's where I have sort of found my hope for the country, is that the more the executive branch tries to do this kind of nonsense with the court that we have, the more opportunity we have to gut the administrative process.
Yeah.
So this is the Chevron doctrine.
And reel them in.
And this is like, you push this so far, you stick your neck out that far, it's going to get cut off.
Yeah.
It's going to get cut off. He's doing it with student loans. He's doing it with all sorts of things, and or maybe COVID restrict. I mean, it's like all this nonsense. Eventually, the Supreme Court is going to have to say, not only can you not do this, this is an opportunity to reel in years of the administrative roughshod over our constitutional freedoms.
Too far out in the deep ocean.
And we're a common sense show. So when Marsha Blackburn asked Ketanji, what is a woman? And she says, I can't tell you.
Right. It's all bullshit.
Dude, we've lost our common sense in this country.
Well, no, the common sense isn't lost. It's just, it's buried because people are too afraid to speak common sense because they don't want to piss off these other idiots who are on their political far right or far left.
Clearly, DeWine was worried about it.
It's all political nonsense.
He's worried about offending men with penises who want to pretend that they're women.
People
can't just look at that and say that's ridiculous.
People are afraid to speak the truth anymore because of
it's ridiculous. That's not a woman. I mean.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to wrap it up. We have been at this quite some time. I think we did tackle some pretty complex and deep, heavy stuff. Forgive us. You can even break it down in chunks and watch it a little bit at a time, folks, because there were some big. I felt like I dominated the conversation too. So sorry
you're
about that.
good. Well, you've been gone for 2 weeks. You had to pent it up.
I had to get it out.
You were pent up.
You're our legal expert.
Expert's the wrong word.
I'm the scab picker.
Right.
That keeps picking open wounds. So,
All right. Well, this has been Common Sense Ohio, brought to you by Harper
and poor
Plus
Brett,
Accounting.
he's trying to enjoy his coffee, and
we're bad. We're jumping on.
I love it.
All right. Well, you can check us out on all sorts of media platforms, including Facebook. We were on YouTube. We got Parler. I think we got Parler. We got
Rumble.
We I don't know. Anyway, wherever we are. And you can check us out on all those places. Or the easiest places, go to commonsenseohioshow.com. Check out all the backlog of episodes. Catch up. There's lots of great stuff there. And it's not just, it transcends time, I think. Like this is one of those discussions that there's really a lot of depth to it. But at any rate, we are coming at you right from the middle each and every week, at least until now.